Food is abundant. From one seed grows a plant which grows many, many of that fruit or vegetable again. It keeps giving and giving and giving.
Hello, I'm Karen Mellers. Hello there, I'm Dr. Rosy Daniel. You've just tuned in to Alive and Loving It, and we're here to help you bring joy and energy back to your life.
Hey, you're here again. Glad to have you back. This week's episode is very dear to my heart. It's the start of 3 weeks of a deep dive into food and nutrition. To be honest, we could probably do the whole podcast on this subject. There is so much to discuss still, and there is so much to share still. And the reason for that is because food is the cornerstone to our health. We are what we eat, right? Well, we all know that. And we've been talking about food for such a long time. Why are we still having to talk about it? Why haven't we got the message yet, Rosie?
Well, as you say, this is such a huge subject. And you could go onto the internet today and find diametrically opposite advice. You know, some people all raw, others, oh no, you can't chill the body like that. You know, people saying don't eat fat, other people saying do, people saying you've got to eat meat, and others saying you cannot eat meat. So, you know, it is such a very confused space for people, but there are some basic truths. But of course, this has been a major focus for you because you are a nutrition coach, aren't you?
Well, I think it goes back even longer than that. It goes back to school. I was fascinated in biology, human biology. You know, how does this body work? What makes us tick? So yeah, my interest in it has gone right back there. But I trained as a nutritional therapist in 2019 just after my mum died, actually. After my mum died, I ate pie for a year. I literally did. And you know what? I needed it. And I think I discovered my friend Sandra Muskimen, who's going to be a guest for us. I discovered her philosophy. I went through her program, and my energy levels returned, and I dropped about a stone in weight. But what really interested me, Rosie, is that connection between emotional trauma and food. You know, it's a comfort. It's a celebration. It's linked to so many things, not just our nutrition, isn't it?
Absolutely, so right. And you know, I know for myself, I've always been an emotional eater, but you know, I'm a foodie, full stop. And those genes have come through. My beloved daughter Eloise is a top chef, and just absolutely excelling in making the most brilliant food. But I think, Karen, you know, there are some core truths in all of this, aren't there? I mean, I know you're very keen on the idea that we need to nourish ourselves, you know, that your approach is, say, for weight loss is about nourishment rather than actually restricting yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I get so many people come to me that want to look better, that want to drop weight. And, you know, I think we all know that is coming from what we think we should look like, what the body image is about. So I really try and help people to reframe that it's about nourishing the body and it's about being well, so that all of the systems that are inside us, immunity, digestion, you know, cognitive health, we've got the nutrients that we need to be able to be well.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, in my own case, weight has always been an issue for two big reasons. Because I love my work more than exercise, so I stay locked in my computer. But also this thing of insulin resistance, and the key cause of that being stress. I have a horrible habit of pushing myself, you know, project. So I'm always running. My default is to be in a high cortisol, high adrenaline state, which feels quite buzzy, but always, if you're doing that, you can very easily go into insulin resistance and just be holding on to the weight, because your body goes into that store mode, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But and I know for you, the thing about fats is a biggie, isn't it, as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm always connecting to, like we both seem to be, our own personal experience and the experience in my wider family as well. But I remember my dear mother-in-law, low fat everything. That's what she would buy. Low fat yogurts, low fat foods. But of course, what people do that make those foods is they load them with sugar. And what we do need for our brain health is good fats.
Yeah.
That's what our brain is made up of. So
Well, and all of the sheaths of all of our nerves. And one of my kind of question marks, it's a bit of a rosy out there theory, but many of us pile the washing up liquid in when we're washing up, and obviously dishwashers and cubes and rinse aid and all these things, all of which dissolve fat. And I see people's washing up sort of dripping with soap suds, thinking, well, all of the plates and cutlery and pans are sort of covered in detergent. And what's that doing to us, our precious cell walls, which are all made of phospholipids? And, now what they're saying is that in terms of the biochemistry and, the functioning of our cells, that it's the nucleus is not the brain of the cell, it's the cell wall, which has got all these gateways and cell transduction pathways, growth mechanisms are all embedded in the cell wall. Well, if we're taking in all this detergent, what's that doing to the integrity of our cell wall? Might that be a factor in cancer, for example?
exactly. I remember the first time you said that to me, Rosie, and I avidly now, I'm washing up liquid still, but eco washing up liquid. But then I'm rinsing every single plate, cup, I can't not now that I know that information. So I didn't know which way we were going to go on this particular podcast. You never know. But if that is one simple technique to take away, please, everybody, wash the washing up liquid off your plate.
Rinse your plates. And I know as well the microbiome is has loomed into view very large at this time. Does that form part of your coaching?
It does. I mean, the body's talking to you all the time, isn't it? And I am learning every single day, still learning, that when I put something in my body, what happens to my digestion system? And, it makes noises, it makes smells. And if that is happening, then those little microbes inside your gut are not happy. So it's what you've got in your gut, the microbiome, what you've got in your gut, and then what you feed it with. And unfortunately, a lot of us, and I am to blame still because sugar is still a crutch for me, is that we feed it with sugar and we don't put enough fiber in. And fiber is what feeds the good bacteria.
Well, yes, and I heard a fascinating bit of research about not just probiotics, but psychobiotics. This idea now that the balance of our microbiome is affecting our state of mind as well as body. And surprise, surprise, it's the bugs that are fed by sugar, which are creating anxiety and depression. So, I know we're all about the link between mind, body, spirit, but it is a vicious cycle because, if we're feeding ourselves sugar, we are literally producing chemicals that make us feel more anxious, So I haven't yet seen psychobiotics for sale, but watch that space.
Absolutely.
And in cancer medicine as well. So there's a wonderful organisation called the British Society of Integrative Oncology, BSIO, and they're now talking about the role of the microbiome in cancer and in our response to cancer therapies, and having to really nurse the microbiome back to life after serious cancer treatments. But I suppose in terms of my big messages about nutrition, I suppose the major one is that most of us are overfed and undernourished.
Yeah.
You know, this the fact that we are taking in way more calories and food in general than we actually need, but often of poor quality. Apparently, the soil these days has something like 50 times less minerals in it on most farms where there's any kind of industrial farming than just after the war. I know that's dinosaur speak. It's a long, long time ago, but you know, I once worked on a lettuce farm as a student in my holidays, and they sprayed for each crop of lettuces. They sprayed the ground 6 times, and the cycle of planting and growing the lettuces was about 6 weeks. And so that same bit of land was used 3 times in a season. So 18 times that land was being sprayed with, you know, pesticides and weed killers and fertilizers. And the growth of that food was being forced so fast. And I think, so for me, you know, this question of eating as local, as seasonal and as organic as we can with food that hasn't been pushed and ended up empty of real nutrition.
Well, I know, Rosie, from visiting your lovely new home, that you grow a lot of your own vegetables as well. How's that journey been?
Well, it started during COVID. Very luckily, I managed to rent a small plot next to my house. And during COVID, Mike installed 7 raised beds. He also got this most unholy large load of manure that arrived. He said, "Shall I get some manure?" And I said, "Absolutely, great, yes." Didn't know that it was kind of almost twice the size of my car. and, and we ended up having to wheelbarrow this all up into the plot. Anyway, we then started planting seeds and plants. And my God, you know, people who came in said, "Are you market gardeners? Are you really experienced?" No, you know, this was our first go, and we probably grew enough for the village, never mind us. And I'm talking about beds that are kind of 1.2 meters by about 4 meters. But honestly, the amount that we grew, his next move was to install a polytunnel. And Mike is big on what he calls nettle goo. So he picks the nettles and sticks them in a tub with water, and it gets really stinky. And then he puts that underneath the tomatoes and around the plants, and they love it. They absolutely love it. So we haven't needed to put anything on the garden, you know, that's not natural at all. And we have more than we can eat most of the time. And the joy of it is that, you know, I mean, I'm picking spring cabbages now that have grown through the winter. We've only just finished the Brussels sprouts. There have been leeks in the garden right through the winter. So it isn't only a summer thing, you know, it keeps going. And sometimes I'll have a plate that's got 4 things on it, you know, that have come from the garden: some onions, some red currant jelly, some leeks, some cabbage. We have learnt, you know, because there are other things that like your tasty vegetables in the garden. So we've had to net all of the brassicas and the sprouts and the broccoli and all that stuff. But honestly, we didn't know what we were doing, and it is easier than you think. The raised beds were a game changer because slugs don't like to climb up the wood, and it brings it all a little bit higher. So, you know, it's as you can tell, it's my happy place. And being out in the polytunnel, it's like all is well with the world.
Well, it does more for you than nourishing your body, doesn't it? It raises your spirit as well. And so good to hear you eating seasonally. I mean, there's so many advantages, not just for us and our body, but for the planet as well. I mean, that's been a conscious choice for you, I think, hasn't it?
Well, yes. And, you know, the big shocker with food miles. So, when we pop into the supermarket and pick up asparagus, it might have come from Peru, for God's sake. That's, had to come on an aeroplane all the way from Peru and so on. And we don't need to do that. It's just really important that we all start looking at where food is coming from. Mm-hmm. Dear Patrick Holden, who started the Soil Association and who I dearly hope we'll have on as a guest, has now started the Sustainable Food Trust with the idea that we try to make every region of the country food secure. What a genius idea.
Exactly.
So that, and Somerset is already food secure. Bristol isn't, but mm-hmm. Somerset is. So this county produces enough food for its people without bringing in anything. And I feel that's the other, the emphasis on local and community and supporting our farmers. Every single one of us needs to tune in and see who's growing around us. If people aren't in a position to grow, then just see who's growing around you. Or even if you see a garden that's not being gardened, I love this idea of being able to perhaps garden somebody else's garden who may be elderly or maybe disabled or, hasn't got the time, because there's so many gardens that are just not being used.
Yeah, we did that in Derbyshire before we left, and all of our friends would just, grow. We'd agree between us what we were growing and then swap, because that really amazed me. It shouldn't have done, but it did. Food is abundant. From one seed grows a plant which grows many, many of that fruit or vegetable again. It keeps giving and giving and giving. So, that was that. When we land in Scotland, I will definitely be doing that. I've got an order in from a polytunnel already. Ooh. I've got friends up in Scotland, and she's my expert now because she has deer and all sorts of animals trying to eat her food. I'm going to be learning a lot from Liz in Scotland. But one thing I know that you've said to me so many times about our body and keeping it healthy is acidity in the body. And when we eat sugar and when we drink wine and when there are a lot of foods that are acidic, our body becomes acidic, and then that leads to disease. So tell us a bit more about that.
Okay. So I used to poo-poo this idea. Way back actually, when I was medical director at the Bristol Cancer Help Centre. So I'm probably talking early 90s. My nutritionist team would come and say, okay, we were already saying to people, let's get you off sugar, let's get you off dairy, milk-based products, let's take out the meat, let's get you onto whole foods and eating really, really high fiber, nuts, seeds, grains, vegetables, which made people feel amazing, by the way. But they would come along and say, well, the next thing, Rosie, is we need to take people off tomatoes and oranges. And I say, what? If we add in taking out these beautiful foods, people will walk away. This is not real. And so I then went out I got encouraged by a beautiful Indian woman in Bristol, Yashu Amlani, to go out to India and meet an Ayurvedic doctor, Dr. Nandlal Tiwari in Rajasthan. He introduced me to a room full of about 50 people who were living 5, 10, 15 years past their prognosis with cancer. He had all their medical notes there, their scans. I looked at what he was showing me and I was just absolutely blown away because, of course, they couldn't afford chemo medicines and radiotherapy, so they were having to go to nature to see, could they change the environment in the body to make it inhospitable to cancer. So I said to him, what are you doing, to produce these amazing results? And he almost grabbed my collar. He said, whatever else you do, Rosie, get your people alkaline, because in his words, cancer cannot grow in an alkaline body. So I thought, okay, that's me told. And he said, the thing you don't understand in the West, where you love your acid, your alcoholic drinks, your tea, your coffee, your vinegar, your lemon, is that acidic bodies become inflamed, and they become gives a basis for infection and also cancer, because that's where cancer starts. So that was me told. I came back from India and I invested in some litmus paper, a roll of litmus paper. And at that time, my clinics were in Bath, in an actual building. I started testing the salivary pH because my physiology friends told me this is the closest approximation to tissue pH. I started checking the salivary pH of me, the person with cancer, and their supporter they brought with them. And the person with cancer was more acidic by far. I mean, most of us in Britain are acidic. So neutral is 7. And most people, if they check themselves today, would be down on 6, 6.5. These people I was seeing with cancer were down on 5, 5.5. Very acidic. So I've made it a major part of my work. And some of the most incredible results have actually been with people with arthritis. So one story of a young woman I met at a party, actually, who was on 4 different medications for arthritis, the whole spectrum: non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, steroids, gold, and methotrexate, which is an anti-cancer drug to stop proliferation of cells. Anyway, I just said to her, leave everything acidic out of your diet. That does, by the way, include lemon and vinegar. There's some misinformation on the internet about that. I'll tell you in a moment. But anyway, I didn't see her for another year. And when I saw her, she practically, hugged me to bits because she said, my doctors can't even see the arthritis on my CT scan anymore. And she was pain free for the first time. She was only 30. Yeah. She'd had juvenile arthritis.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't see her then for another 6 months or so. And I said, how are you doing? And she said, I'm actually getting ill again. And I said, so what's changed? What are you doing? And she thought, and she said, oh my God, it's tomatoes. So tomatoes are the only acidic vegetable. And she remembered then that as a little kid, tomatoes had caused her to have an upset tummy and a sore mouth. So her body had been telling her from a very young child that this wasn't helpful for her, but it was a game changer. So that's something anybody listening that's got arthritis or any other. I've had clients whose psoriasis is gone, whose eczema's gone, these other inflammatory conditions, when they've moved their body alkaline.
Well, what's so important for me, and I'm just tuning into it again as I'm listening to you speak, is listen to your body. You're not supposed to feel pain. Pain is an indicator that something is starting to go wrong. And from personal experience, Rosie, I've been through that journey. Before I did the program with Sandra, I had joint pain in my shoulders and in my hips. And I have a back condition, so I'm used to muscle pain.
Yeah.
It wasn't muscle pain. It was deep inside my bones. And that was the first time that I did an alkaline diet. And I went to the doctors, they couldn't do anything for me. So my spirit went really low, thinking I was going to live with this pain for the rest of my life. And I did the 8-week detox, alkalined my diet. That pain has never come back. And just recently with you, when I came to see you, I had an appointment about acid in my stomach. When I was eating a meal or I was drinking wine at the same time as eating a meal, the burn in my stomach was so painful.
Yeah.
And thank goodness I'm in tune with my body. I'm listened to it. I think there's so many of us that are overriding these signs.
Yeah.
And within my stomach, I've now cut out tomatoes. I now am 9 weeks without alcohol. Can't believe it. But whenever I eat a meal now, there is no pain at all. And just want to share one more thing with you about that, because Our friend Claire Hattersley, that's been a guest on the podcast with us, the biodynamic farmer, she once said to me about whole grains and food that is really vital, that sometimes when you eat that, when you eat the whole grain, when you eat this food that's vital, you can get like a cramp in your stomach, or it can be hard to digest that food initially. But that is because it is exercising. You know, your digestion system needs to exercise. It can get sluggish when it's eating food that's not got nourishment in it. So when you go back to real food, you're going to have to exercise that digestive system a little bit. So the message is keep going, because it will get stronger. It brings the will back to our body. That's what Claire said, the will back to our body.
Oh, that's interesting. But just picking up on what you're saying about gastritis, people call it heartburn or reflux, esophagitis, that is a red light flashing. You know, our bodies should not be regurgitating acid up our gullet or esophagus. And it's very important, if that's happening, to be checked for a bacteria called Helicobacter pylori, which thrives in that acidic condition, because that can be linked to ulcers and even to cancer. So often that gets missed and is a treatable cause of future problems. But, you know, of course, what Western medicine does is say, oh, I know what we'll do. We'll switch off the acid. And guess what that does? It means you don't digest your food properly, because the acid content of our tummies is absolutely crucial for the breaking down of our food into digestible, it's called chyme, and so that it goes on through in a partially digested state. And for most people, if they go on to a low acid way of eating, the heartburn will go. And of course, you mentioned at the get-go about the link with emotions. A lot of people don't realize that when we are in high alert, in sympathetic nervous system activation, the entire wiring of the body changes over to favor the mind and the muscles. Because if you're being chased by a tiger, you know, digesting your breakfast is your last priority. You know, you have to think fast and you have to run like hell. Okay. So in nature, you either get caught and eaten, game over, or you get away and then you shake out all that adrenaline. This is if you're a deer or whatever. And then you go back over into parasympathetic, rest, restore, digest, and regenerate, rebalance, homeostasis. And so for many of us who live our life in perpetual stress, I mean, I illustrate it as an infinity sign. You know, we are hardwired to flow out into maximum stress, challenge, threat. But the idea is that you flow back into equal and opposite rest, restore, regenerate. But a lot of us have that a very uneven, you know, we flow out, and we go back across maybe for a little blip, you know, few minutes, rest, restore, regenerate, and then we're back off again out into stress. So a lot of people who have digestive problems, it's because they are in stress. They're in high alert. And so for anybody listening who has irritable bowel syndrome or constipation, you know, that learning to let go is absolutely crucial. And for that, I recommend getting a heart rate variability monitor, such as HeartMath or Complete Coherence, so that you can see where you are in that balance of your nervous system.
Yeah, I mean, you can see from the subject of food and nutrition, we can go to every single principle. And it isn't isolated. You know, it's not just, oh, I need to lose some weight, so I'll decrease my food and I'll increase my exercise. It's not about that at all. It's connected to so many other things: stress, emotions, environment. your spirit, if your spirit's
Yeah.
low, you eat food. You can't take it in isolation, Rosie. I think that's a key message.
Absolutely. And, it's important to ask ourselves if we are carrying extra weight, if I'm trying to feed, if I'm hungry, if I'm trying to fill a gap in myself, what is it I'm missing?
Mm,
And 9 times out of 10, it's soul food or love and attention and affection,
mm,
that we're just filling that empty place inside ourselves
mm.
with the food. But I know you and I made a fantastic online course last year, Karen. For anybody thinking, well, where the hell do I start with all of this? Karen and I have made a 12-step process. It can be done over 12 weeks, or if you want to go faster, you can. But it's called the Health Creation Food Program. And I'm sure, Karen, you'll put this in our show notes, a link to that, because Karen and I have done the theory, and Eloise, Chef Eloise, my daughter, has done some very accessible recipes to make changing over to this way of eating accessible, because it is a big subject, and changing how we eat, it does take a little bit of support. And of course, Karen, you're available to coach people who need extra help and support, as is our guest. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm still learning. And it is a journey. And educating yourself about how your body works. It's sort of like once you know something, you can't forget it. And that makes it difficult to then choose. It still happens if we reach for the alcohol, or we reach for the sugar, or we reach for the cake. It still happens. And actually, we're just human, Rosie, aren't we? Sometimes when we're in those stressful situations, we need something to get us through.
For sure. And then, think about what happens when we fall in love. And, hopefully everybody listening has had that happen at one time or another. Food disappears out of the picture. You're not even thinking about food. You're so excited and at that kind of higher energy level. But also, when you are in beauty, or in that place of receiving your soul food, usually you're not thinking about food. But I mean, the other thing we haven't even touched on, and we can touch on this much more with our wonderful guest, Sandra, your teacher, coming up next, but is the question of supplementation of our nutrition. I mentioned about overfed and undernourished. I am a massive fan of the nutritional company Cytoplan, who make food state nutrients and whole food nutrients that are fed to our bodies in the same way as food. And they taught me very early on that for most people who now are sedentary, sitting at a computer all day, probably only needing no more than 1,600 calories. Previously, when I learned domestic science at school, it was, a woman needed 2,500, a man working needed 3,500. Nowadays, most of us will put on weight if we're eating more than about 1,500 calories in a day. Well, what they're saying is every mouthful would need to be organic for that to fulfill the nutritional need. So their message is that we do need to take a multivitamin and make sure that all the basics are covered if we are eating so much less to stay in balance.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked about the infinity symbol, and anybody watching on YouTube will have seen Rosie doing this symbol, and you mention balance a lot. I mean, that's what we're aiming for, is balance, because in whatever fad comes along, and I use that term very loosely because I do agree in supplementation, but we can take it too far. And I have seen people who are like, well, that's a quick thing. I'll take supplements because it's easy to just take that pill. And I'm still not giving any time over to cooking real food.
Yeah.
I'll put a processed microwave dinner in because I'm so busy. And, how does this compute that there isn't enough time to eat properly? It like amazes me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I've asked my clients, what are you saving time for if you're using processed food or you just pop in the supplements? And you know what the answer is, Rosie? Most of the time, they sit and scroll on their phone, scrolling on social media. So is it really saving time? And actually, if we're cooking our own food, we're taking the time to go and choose our food. We're choosing we're smelling this lovely food, and then we cook it, and maybe we're cooking for somebody else, and we're putting love and care into it. I mean, actually, you are using your body, so you're using up calories instead of just sitting there scrolling on your mobile phone.
Yeah.
But there's so much more enjoyment and joy and fulfillment from making your own food. I lived in Spain for a couple of months this year, and I lived in Lanzarote last year. You cannot buy ready meals. If you can get a pizza, you're lucky. But in our supermarkets, there's just rows and rows of these ready processed meals so that we can go out and do something more important. Really? What is more important? The Spanish are just like, there's the food. We don't know anything else about the food,
And the Italians too. I went on holiday and I took the River Cafe book with me to Italy to buy Italian ingredients in Italy to cook these beautiful recipes. And what I loved was simplicity. I learned that I love fennel. And this recipe was, I think it only had fennel and onion in it, but the way they cooked it and it was divine, just focusing on one or two ingredients. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it is my favorite subject, food.
Mine too. I bet we mention it in every single episode that we do. And we can go off in so many directions. We've got 2 more episodes on the subject next week and the week after with some really fascinating guests to end season 1. So join us again next week because I think it's most people's favourite subject is food. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge, Rosie. It has changed my life. I know it will change so many others. And you're just simple, explanation about how the body works. It really lands. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure. And thank you too, Karen. Just brilliant.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Alive and Loving It. We really hope that today's conversation has sparked your passion and shown you ways to open up into the vibrant life that's possible for you. Absolutely, Rosie. I mean, we have to remember transformation begins with love, and that's self-love, love for others, and love for our beautiful planet. When you embrace love and you just allow yourself to receive as much as you give, you unlock the fullest potential of your life. That is the truth, and we're here to support you every step of the way on your journey. So if you enjoyed what you heard today, please join our community, check out our trainings and our services and the events where we can all go deeper together. And do please send us your feedback. We want to hear your ideas for the podcast, who you'd like to see us interview, the questions you want to ask, and get answered through the contact page on our website, aliveandlovingit.org. I can't wait to read them. And when you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter and updates. And what about following us on Instagram as well? We are at Alive and Loving It Community. Once you've signed up to the newsletter, you'll receive extra notes from today's show and more inspiration to help you live your most vibrant life. Thank you for being with us. Keep shining, stay true to yourself, and remember, this is your time to live your fullest, healthiest life. So until next time, keep doing what you love most in life. I know Rosie and I will be, always. We're so excited to connect with you on the next episode of Alive and Loving It. And we welcome you with open hearts to our Alive and Loving It community.